podcast on DreqoFM.
Welcome back to the Unfiltered Frequencies podcast. I'm Dreqo, your host, and today we're diving into the mysterious and fascinating world of Edgar Cayce and the Akashic Records. If you've ever wondered about the possibilities of a universal library that holds every thought, action, and event in history, then this is the episode for you. Imagine this. A man lies on a couch, seemingly asleep. Around him, a small group of people waits in silence, the air thick with anticipation. Suddenly, he begins to speak, his voice calm but otherworldly. He describes remedies for illnesses he's never studied, recounts past lives of people he's never met, and tells stories of ancient civilizations long lost to the sands of time. This man is Edgar Cayce, the so-called sleeping prophet whose trances captivate thousands and left a legacy that still intrigues us today. Now, I've always been a skeptic, but that doesn't mean I don't love a good story. Growing up, I'd tune into Art Bell's Coast to Coast AM and hear these wild discussions about Cayce's life and his supposed ability to tap into the Akashic Records. I didn't buy into it, but man, did it spark my curiosity. Was Cayce truly accessing a cosmic database? Or was he just a really creative storyteller? That's the kind of question that keeps me coming back to his story. In this episode, we're going to break it all down. Who Edgar Cayce was and how he became known as the Sleeping Prophet. What the Akashic Records are and why they're such a fascinating concept. And finally, why these ideas continue to capture the imaginations of so many people even decades later after Cayce's death. So whether you're here as a believer, a skeptic, or just someone who loves exploring the unknown, there's something for everyone in today's discussion. Let's get into it. To understand the intrigue surrounding Edgar Cayce and his connection to the Akashic Records, we first need to explore the man himself. Who was this sleeping prophet, and how did he go from being a modest man in Kentucky to one of the most talked about mystics of the 20th century? Edgar Cayce was born on March 18, 1877, in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. He came from a simple farming family raised in a devout Christian household. From an early age, he showed an intense interest in the Bible, even claiming to have memorized it by sleeping with the book under his pillow, a story that seems to foreshadow his later abilities. Cayce's upbringing was steeped in faith, and his religious roots deeply influenced the way he interpreted the world. But Cayce wasn't just a dreamer, he was a practical, hard-working young man. With only an 8th grade education, he found himself working in various jobs, including as a photographer. This humble background makes his later success even more fascinating. It was an unexpected illness that set Cayce on the path to becoming the sleeping prophet. In his early 20s, he developed severe laryngitis, leaving him unable to speak for months. Desperate for a cure, he turned to a hypnotist. During one of these sessions, Cayce reportedly fell into a trance-like state and began diagnosing his own condition. Amazingly, his voice returned, and he discovered he could do the same for others. This discovery transformed his life. From that point on, Cayce became known for his readings, sessions where he would lie down, enter a self-induced trance, and speak as if accessing information from another realm. As word spread about Cayce's abilities, people began seeking him out for help with medical conditions, spiritual questions, and even insights into their past lives. Over the course of his life, Cayce conducted more than 14,000 documented readings, which are still preserved today. His readings primarily focused on 4 key areas. 1. Health advice. Cayce often prescribed natural remedies and dietary adjustments, many of which align with today's holistic health practices. 2. Past lives. He introduced many clients to the concept of reincarnation, linking their current struggles to karmic lessons from previous lifetimes. 3. Spiritual guidance. Cayce emphasized meditation, prayer, and living in harmony with universal laws. 4. Unusual claims. And then there were the more outlandish topics, like the lost civilization of Atlantis, which he claimed was highly advanced and destined to resurface someday. Cayce's fame grew steadily, but so did the controversy. His deeply Christian upbringing clashed with his readings on Reincarnation and Atlantis. Despite this, Cayce never renounced his faith, framing his work as part of God's plan rather than a contradiction to it. Before his death in 1945, Cayce helped establish the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, Virginia. This organization still preserves his readings and promotes his teachings, hosting workshops and publishing research to this day. But Cayce's influence extends far beyond the Association of Research and Enlightenment. He's considered one of the key figures in modern metaphysical and New Age thought. His ideas about reincarnation, holistic health, and the Akashic Records have inspired countless spiritual seekers. Even skeptics have to admit that Cayce left a legacy that few could rival. Now here's the thing about Edgar Cayce. Whether or not you believe in his abilities, the man himself is fascinating. He wasn't flashy, he didn't seem to seek out fame, and he certainly didn't get rich from his readings. By all accounts, he was a humble, sincere, and genuinely wanted to help people. For me, that's what makes his story so compelling. Even if his claims about Atlantis or the Akashic Records are hard to swallow, you can't help but admire the dedication he showed to his work and the comfort he brought to so many people. Next, we're diving into one of the most intriguing aspects of Edgar Cayce's work, the Akashic Records. What are they, and why do they continue to captivate the imaginations of spiritual seekers and skeptics alike? The Akashic Records are one of the most fascinating and mysterious concepts tied to Edgar Cayce's work. Often described as a universal library or cosmic database, the Akashic Records are said to hold every thought, action, and event from the past, present, and even future. Think of it as an ultimate metaphysical cloud storage, but instead of holding files, it stores the essence of all human experience across time. The term Akashic comes from the Sanskrit word Akasha, meaning ether or sky. In ancient Indian philosophies, Akasha represents the fifth element, a formless and infinite substance that underpins the universal. This idea eventually merged with Western esoteric thought, giving birth to the concept of the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records are believed to exist on a spiritual plane and are accessible to those with heightened consciousness, like mystics, psychics, or mediators. Cayce described these as a massive, universal library that could be tapped into for insights into the soul's journey, past lives, or even the meaning of existence. Edgar Cayce claimed that during his trances, he could access the Akashic Records to retrieve detailed information about individuals. According to Cayce, these records weren't just static data, but living, breathing accounts of each person's soul journey. They revealed karmic lessons, unresolved issues from past lives, and guidance for spiritual growth. Here are a few ways Cayce applied the Akashic Records in his readings. Past life insights. For one client, Cayce described a past life as a priestess in ancient Egypt, linking the person's current struggles to unresolved karmic debts. Soul missions. He often referred to a person's life purpose as something mapped out in the Akashic Records. For instance, a reading might explain why someone was drawn to a particular profession or why they faced repeated challenges. Predictions. Cayce believed the records also held glimpses of the future, though these glimpses were influenced by free will and collective choices. Cayce described accessing the Akashic Records as if opening a spiritual ledger. He didn't claim to see words or images, but rather received impressions that translated into information he shared during his trances. The Akashic Records have parallels in many religious and spiritual traditions. In Christianity, it's reminiscent of the Book of Life mentioned in the Bible. In Hinduism and Buddhism, Karma and the eternal nature of the soul align with the idea of a record tracking one's actions and their consequences. Even in modern philosophy, Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious shares similarities with the idea of a shared, universal repository of knowledge. Today, the Akashic Records are a cornerstone of New Age spirituality. Practitioners claim they can access these records through meditation, hypnosis, or other altered states of consciousness. For many, the records are seen as a tool for healing, self-discovery, and guidance. The Akashic Records lack empirical evidence, though, and are often dismissed by skeptics as pseudoscience or metaphysical speculation. From a scientific perspective, there is no measurable proof that such a record exists, or that anyone can access it. Critics argue that what mystics like Cayce access might have been a combination of subconscious intuition, memory, and pattern recognition. In other words, the information Cayce retrieved could have been his mind's way of connecting dots rather than pulling from a cosmic library. There's also the issue of interpretation. If someone claims to access the Akashic Records for another person, how can you verify their accuracy? And what happens if their reading has negative consequences for the person receiving it? But the Akashic Records tap into something deeply human, the desire to understand our purpose and our connection to the greater universe. They offer a comforting idea that our lives are part of a larger, meaningful narrative. For believers, the records aren't just about metaphysics. They provide a framework for healing and self-improvement. Whether it's understanding past traumas, resolving karmic cycles, or finding clarity in life's challenges, the records offer practical guidance. Even for skeptics, the idea of a cosmic library storing all of human experience is captivating. It's a concept that bridges the gap between science fiction and spiritual philosophy, inviting us to imagine possibilities beyond the physical world. I'll be honest, I love the idea of the Akashic Records, not because I believe they exist, but because they embody so much of what makes us human. Our curiosity, our need for answers, and our endless capacity to dream. Whether the records are real or just a powerful metaphor, they remind us to look inward and reflect on our place in the universe. But at the same time, I can't help but approach this topic with a healthy dose of skepticism. Is there really a spiritual database out there? Or is it just a reflection of our own hopes, fears, and imaginations? I'll leave that for you to decide. Up next, we'll look at some of Edgar Cayce's most famous readings and predictions. Did he really tap into the Akashic Records to reveal lost civilizations and hidden truths? Or is it all just speculation? Edgar Cayce is remembered not just for his trance sessions, but for the incredible range of topics he covered during his readings. From health advice and spiritual guidance to reincarnation and lost civilizations, Cayce's readings touched on just about every corner of the metaphysical world. But today, we're going to focus on some of his most famous predictions and readings, the ones that still spark debate, fascination, and even a little controversy. Many of Cayce's early readings focus on physical health. He diagnosed illnesses, prescribed treatments, and recommended remedies that were often surprisingly holistic for his time. Cayce would suggest dietary changes like increasing vegetables and avoiding processed foods, natural remedies such as herbal teas, castor oil packs, and even acupuncture-like techniques. Psychological healing, including the role of stress and emotions in physical illness. It's worth noting that some of his advice aligned with modern holistic health practices, something that continues to surprise people. One famous case involved a man with severe arthritis. Cayce recommended a regimen that included dietary changes, physical therapy, and spiritual meditation. Decades later, many of these recommendations are now considered standard advice for managing arthritis. While Cayce's advice often seemed ahead of his time, skeptics argue that his success stories were anecdotal and some of his remedies lacked scientific backing. Cayce's readings frequently touched on reincarnation, a concept largely foreign to his Christian contemporaries. He claimed that many of his clients' struggles, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, could be traced to unresolved issues from past lives. One of the most famous reincarnation readings involved a woman who experienced chronic fear and anxiety. Cayce described her past life as someone who had suffered persecution during the Spanish Inquisition. He suggested that addressing the unresolved trauma from that life would help her heal in the present. This idea of past lives was one of the most controversial aspects of Cayce's work, as it clashed with mainstream Christian theology. Yet it became one of the key reasons why his readings gained traction in New Age circles. If there's one reading that put Cayce on the map for paranormal enthusiasts, it's his repeated references to Atlantis. According to Cayce, Atlantis was an advanced civilization that sank beneath the ocean about 10,000 years ago due to its misuse of technology. He claimed that Atlanteans harnessed powerful crystals for energy and that their spiritual wisdom was unmatched. Cayce predicted the remnants of Atlantis would begin to surface near the Bahamas in the 1960s, with significant finds around the Bimini Road, a mysterious underwater rock formation. While other enthusiasts believe this aligns with his predictions, mainstream science dismisses the Bimini Road as a natural geological formation. Whether or not you believe in Atlantis, it's clear that Cayce's vivid descriptions helped keep the legend alive, blending it with themes of spiritual growth and humanity's potential downfall. During his readings, Cayce made several predictions about major Earth changes. He spoke of shifting poles, rising sea levels, and catastrophic natural disasters that would reshape the planet. According to Cayce, these changes were not just physical, but spiritual, reflecting humanity's collective actions. Cayce predicted that much of the east coast of the United States, including New York City, would be underwater by the late 20th century. Clearly, that didn't happen, leading many to question the accuracy of his prophecies. Some followers argue that these predictions weren't meant to be taken literally, but symbolically, representing humanity's need for spiritual evolution. Others chalk them up to Cayce's occasional fallibility. After all, even he admitted his readings weren't always accurate. One of Cayce's most enduring legacies is his spiritual guidance. Through the Akashic Records, Cayce emphasized the importance of living a purposeful and harmonious life. He encouraged meditation, prayer, and self-reflection as tools to align with the universal laws of karma and spiritual growth. Many of Cayce's readings were practical, offering advice on how to be a better person, treat others with kindness and empathy, focus on self-improvement and personal responsibility, seek balance in all aspects of life, physical, mental, and spiritual. Whether or not you believe Cayce accessed the Akashic Records, it's hard to deny the universal truth in much of his advice. His teaching about love, forgiveness, and self-awareness resonate across cultures and religions. So what do you make of all this? Edgar Cayce's readings are undeniably fascinating, but how much of it was real, and how much was just creative storytelling? Personally, I think the beauty of Cayce's work lies in its ability to spark curiosity. Even if you don't believe he accessed the Akashic Records or saw Atlantis in his trances, his readings remind us to look deeper, whether that's into our own lives or the mysteries of the universe. Up next, we'll explore why Edgar Cayce's ideas continue to fascinate people, from his holistic health advice to his spiritual teachings. What is it about his legacy that keeps us coming back for more? Even decades after his death, Edgar Cayce remains a polarizing yet captivating figure. Whether you see him as a genuine mystic, a product of his time, or simply a fascinating storyteller, there's no denying the lasting impact of his ideas. From his health readings to his spiritual teachings, Cayce's work has left an indelible mark on culture, spirituality, and even science fiction. Cayce's health readings emphasize the connection between the body, mind, and spirit, concepts that were revolutionary during his time but are now staples of holistic health practices. He advocates for Balanced diets emphasizing fresh whole foods, meditation and relaxation to manage stress, natural remedies like castor oil packs and herbal teas. Many of these ideas predated the rise of modern wellness movements, making him a pioneer in the field. Today, holistic health practitioners often cite Cayce as an early advocate for integrative medicine. Even skeptics acknowledge that his advice to eat more vegetables, reduce processed foods, and find emotional balance is as relevant now as it was in the 1930s. Cayce's work also laid the groundwork for many concepts that would later become central to his New Age movement. His teachings on reincarnation, karma, and the Akashic Records introduced millions to the ideas previously associated with Eastern religions. In particular, his emphasis on personal responsibility and spiritual growth resonated with those seeking a more individualistic approach to faith and self-improvement. One of Cayce's most controversial contributions was his insistence that reincarnation was not only real, but integral to understanding life's challenges. This idea has since become a cornerstone of New Age spirituality, influencing books, workshops, and countless personal explorations of past lives. At their core, Cayce's teachings are about living a life of integrity, kindness, and purpose. Whether you believe in karma or past lives, his emphasis on love, forgiveness, and balance transcends religious boundaries. Cayce's work gained a second wind in the 20th century, thanks in part to radio programs like Coast to Coast AM. Shows like Art Bell's introduced Cayce's readings to a whole new audience, blending his work with other paranormal phenomena like UFOs and ancient mysteries. Cayce's ideas also inspired countless works of fiction and pop culture. His vivid descriptions of Atlantis and spiritual evolution echo in stories about lost civilizations and advanced ancient technology. Even the concept of the Akashic Records has appeared in books, movies, and video games as a metaphor for hidden knowledge. However, not everyone is convinced of Cayce's authenticity, and that's part of what keeps him relevant. Skeptics point out that many of his predictions didn't come true, such as his claim that Atlantis would rise from the oceans by the 1960s, or that cities like New York would be underwater. Others argue that his trance readings were a product of his subconscious mind rather than a connection to a higher plane. But even critics find value in examining Cayce's life and work. For them, his story is a window into the human psyche, our need to find meaning or fascination with the unknown, and our ability to weave stories that resonate across generations. Cayce's work taps into our innate curiosity about the unknown. Concepts like the Akashic Records and reincarnation offer a sense of wonder and possibility, encouraging us to ask the big questions. Why are we here? What happens after we die? Is there more to this universe than we can actually see? For many, Cayce's readings provide a sense of order and purpose in an often chaotic world. The idea that our actions have meaning and that we're part of a larger spiritual journey can be deeply reassuring. Cayce addresses universal concerns: health, purpose, destiny, and the nature of the soul. These are questions that transcend time, culture, and belief systems, ensuring his ideas remain relevant even as our understanding of our world evolves. For me, the continued fascination with Edgar Cayce comes down to two things: the mystery and the humanity. On one hand, his readings challenge us to think beyond the tangible, to imagine a universe that's bigger, stranger, and more interconnected than we realize. On the other hand, his life reminds us of our shared desire to help, to heal, and to make sense of the world. Whether you see him as a prophet, a storyteller, or something in between, Cayce's work invites us to explore, and that's something we can all appreciate. Edgar Cayce's story is one of the most fascinating in modern mysticism. From his humble beginnings in Kentucky to his rise as a so-called sleeping prophet, Cayce's life was anything but ordinary. Through thousands of trance readings, he explored everything from health and spirituality to reincarnation and ancient civilizations. And whether you believe he tapped into the Akashic Records or not, there's no denying the impact of his work. Key takeaways from his story and readings. His health readings laid the foundation for modern holistic practices. His spiritual teachings introduced millions to concepts like reincarnation and karma, and his bold claims, like those about Atlantis, kept his legacy alive in both paranormal and pop culture discussions. But what really stands out to me is Cayce's sincerity. He didn't seek fame or fortune. He genuinely believed in his mission to help others. That authenticity is rare, and it's part of why his legacy endures. There's something universally compelling about the idea of accessing hidden knowledge. Whether it's through the Akashic Records, dreams, or intuition, Cayce's work taps into our collective curiosity, offering answers, or at least possibilities, for some of life's biggest questions. Cayce's teachings give people a sense of purpose. His focus on karma and spiritual growth suggests that everything we do has meaning and contributes to a greater cosmic plan. In an uncertain world, that's a powerful message. Even for skeptics, vivid imagery of Atlantis, ancient Egypt, and spiritual evolution is captivating. It's the kind of storytelling that sparks imagination and inspires us to wonder what might be possible. I'll be the first to admit I approach these topics with a healthy dose of skepticism. Not all of Cayce's predictions came true, and many of his claims lack empirical evidence. But that doesn't mean his work has no value. Whether or not he accessed the Akashic Records, Cayce's teachings about kindness, self-improvement, and spiritual growth are timeless. For me, the real takeaway isn't whether Cayce was right or wrong, it's the questions he encouraged us to ask. What if our actions do ripple through eternity? What if there's more to this life than we can see? Cayce's story reminds us to stay curious, to keep exploring, and to never stop seeking the truth. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think about Edgar Cayce and the Akashic Records? Do you believe he tapped into something extraordinary? Or do you think it's just a fascinating story? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or somewhere in between, I hope today's episode gave you something to think about. Edgar Cayce may not have all the answers, but his life and work remind us of the importance of curiosity, compassion, and self-discovery. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Unfiltered Frequencies podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with someone who loves exploring the unknown. As always, thanks for being here, stay awesome, and I'll talk to you soon.